So we already talk about like this type of aerobic endurance training is right. I think you remember. If I do not really have time, but still I would like to talk about this. How about class doesn't make sense? So this is kind of like for athlete. We can do for just general population too, but this is usually for athlete. Yeah, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So strength and conditioning. It sounds like only like a strength athlete, but not really. Right? So like a marathon, that's the same too. So there are how many? Is 5 different training type, but as you see, the duration is different and exercise intensity is different, is it right? And dependent exercise intensity is the duration is different based on understanding our like metabolism, energy system, right? So is intensity and duration is recommended this kind of training. How about class? Does it make sense? And another one, yeah, it's like a sun symbol, right? This symbol means it has a quiz question. Yes, we just talk about exercise order. So the last one is a progression, exercise progression. This is a little bit different. You learn or you already learned KINS 456A. That is for cardiorespiratory fitness. Their approaching and this approach is a little bit different. It's from the NSC our textbook. So progression of an aerobic endurance program involve increase, this is interesting, frequency, intensity, and duration. So for me, is it maybe frequency is a little bit different approach, but how about NSC our textbook? Increase exercise, like for progression, frequency is important, duration is important, and intensity is a kind of a later one, last one. But when I teach for general population, I usually talk about intensity because usually general population, they're like exercise, the status is really low. So had better apply is intensity first. But this case, athlete is always we are worried about athletes is overtraining. So intensity is a little bit later, right? Top class doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So frequency, intensity, or duration should not increase by more than 10% each week. So each week is increased 10%. That's too much. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And when it is not feasible to increase frequency or duration, progression can occur with intensity manipulation. See, it sounds like frequency, duration first, and intensity. How about that doesn't make sense? Because these are already athletes. So I think our textbook is imagine, right? Is the athlete's intensity is a little bit close. So how about that doesn't make sense? So for example, so this table, right? So could you see its intensity part? Is that intensity? I think it would like to maintain. Doesn't make sense. But increase duration and frequency. Yeah, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. If any like anything can increase intensity, they can increase intensity too. Progression of intensity should be monitored to prevent overtraining. So how can monitor is right? How can monitor like overtraining or not? As many times using heart rate. Which heart rate? Resting heart rate. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So in the morning, like just get up and maybe 5-minute rest and measuring resting heart rate. It can be like monitored. But for me, I'm not really sure it's a really good idea. But for me, which kind of heart rate is better to monitor overtraining or their condition? For example, like this. How about before starting, like a starting exercise program, we need like a warming up, is right? So for example, 7-mile power for 5 minutes. This is my warming up. But I usually measure my heart rate during that period. So I can figure out maybe today is a good condition or bad condition, or another one, this is kind of maybe overreaching or overtraining, is right? Always same exercise intensity, 7-mile per hour. Usually my heart rate 115 to 120. But how about today? is like 130 or 129 and feel like already tired, but that kind of approach doesn't make sense, doesn't make sense. But that is very subjective. And I'll talk about right now is each training type, So first, long, slow, distance training, LSD, right? So training distance greater than race distance. So it means, how about if your athlete is a main event 5 km, that case long slow distance training is a 10 km. How about it doesn't make sense? If your athlete is a main event is a 10 km, that case long slow distance training is half marathon. Half class doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So this like longer than 30 minutes, this exercise intensity should be around 70% of VO2 max. Is it right? But you know, we are kinesiology major. Yeah, but during the COVID-19 and even before the COVID-19, not too many students know their VO2 max value. How about class doesn't make sense? Yeah, using metabolic cart and at the laboratory, it's not too many we have opportunity to get this kind of testing. How about class doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. And another one is that there are different protocol and trainee, so not training, technician should be trained like a tech, and another one, many athletes has different condition for whole year. So this is why it's not really real world cannot get really good max data. How about class doesn't make sense? So this case, oh my goodness, I should exercise long, slow distance, but I do not have any VO2 max. So how can you get VO2 max value without metabolic cart using like a high GXT exercise, gradient exercise testing? How can you know your VO2 max value? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Without metabolic cart, how can we really know is our VO2 max value? Class, do you have any idea? Yeah, so this case is field test is important, right? So, oh, yes, it's possible. So how about class Haji said we can estimate VO2 max value from GXT, gradient exercise test, GXT. But how about Tazi gradient exercise test is Bruce protocol. Bruce protocol. Without metabolic cart to calculate our VO2 max value, we need the Bruce protocol, not other protocol. How about class and Tazi doesn't make sense? But Bruce protocol, Bruce protocol, the what is it? Incline is 20% incline. So every 3 minutes increase exercise intensity, graded and speed, but Bruce protocol start 10% grade. So after 9 minutes is already after 6 minutes, but 2% increase. So after 9 minutes already higher than 15%. So you need 16% grade. But as you know, commercial gym, commercial center, right? They have a 15% incline. Class, do you agree? Every commercial treadmill, most of the commercial treadmill, the 15% is maximum. But Tajay mentioned about the GXT. GXT mean is the like Bruce protocol. Bruce protocol after 9 minutes is already 16%. So it means we cannot use Bruce protocol. So we cannot use any Bruce protocol equation to predict VO2 max. So this is why we cannot get it. Doesn't make sense? We can use customized protocol. This case, we need metabolic cart to get oxygen consumption. How about class? Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense. So this is why Dr. Won is like a keep like encourage students to get their 1.5 mile run test. So using this 1.5 mile run test, they can get a pretty good VO2 max value, estimate VO2 max value. How about class? Does it make sense? However, why Dr. Gon do not recommend 1 mile walking test, but he recommend 1.5 mile run test? Any student, do you have any idea? I do not recommend 1 mile walking test, but I recommend 1.5 mile run test. Because 1.5 mile run test, you do not need to measure your heart rate. But 1 mile walking test, exercise is low, is right? Isn't that all-out exercise? So performance is not really all-out exercise, so cannot predict well. So 1 mile walking test need heart rate testing. Doesn't make sense. End of the stage, you should measure heart rate, but without heart rate measurement, right, it has error occurred. How about doesn't make sense? Error occurred. So measuring heart rate 15 seconds, there are error. So this is why predict VO2 max value is not really good. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And another one is not all out exercise. The last one is field test, VO2 max test. The minimum distance is 1.5 miles. So this is why. How about class? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So how about this slide? Is really good, but there are 70% of VO2 max. But if you don't know your VO2 max value, how can you know 70% of VO2 max is right? Like this kind of approach doesn't make sense. In that case, I recommend 1.5 mile run test, not 1 mile walking test, because 1 mile walking test too short, and you should measure heart rate. That can make error. Is right? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Even 1.5 mile run test, not one time test. No, you should test several times, and you can pick highest one. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So for me, if I write this textbook, I would like to put 70% of VO2 max or 70% of your maximum 1.5 mile run test performance. How about class? Doesn't make sense. So how practical? How practical? And adaptation from this exercise, which kind of exercise? 70% of VO2 max and 30 minutes to 2 hours is right. 30 minutes to 2 hours, right? That kind of exercise enhance the body ability to clear lactate. Oh, it means during exercise, lactate releases, right? Actually, this is good, right? Because without lactate, we cannot exercise high intensity, is right? And lactate, but however, this good lactate even accumulated based on mass action effect, right? So mass action effect, if your lactate accumulated, glycolysis should stop. How about that? Doesn't make sense? Even lactate is good. This lactate should go out of the muscle and in the blood and should be go somewhere. Doesn't make sense? We call lactate clearance, is right? Lactate clearance. But using 70% of VO2 max, even lactate doesn't really go out of the blood. It can go to the slow twitch muscle in their mitochondria. It can be oxidized. How about class? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Like that kind of approach. This kind of training help to clear lactate. Is it right? And another one, HIIT program, high intensity interval training program, popular, is right? That case, 2-minute fast speed is close to VO2 max speed. And another 2 minutes, like this one, 70% of VO2 max. So 2-minute high exercise intensity, 2-minute low exercise intensity. Does it make sense? In this case, I want to say 100% VO2 max, low intensity, 70% of VO2 max. Why? Because 100% VO2 max during 2 minutes, it releases lactate. Doesn't make sense? And proton a little bit. Right? But how about after 2 minutes, this period, another 2 minutes, this exercise intensity, consume, clear lactate. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So 2 minutes release lactate, another 2 minutes consume this lactate. Doesn't make sense because size principle is low exercise intensity. The fast twitch muscle take rest, but at that time release lactate. This lactate go to the slow twitch muscle in mitochondria in slow twitch muscle and be oxidized there as an energy, as a substrate. How about class? Doesn't make sense. It's like a hybrid car, like that kind of approach. Because cousin eventually shift type 2X fiber to type 1 fiber. So high exercise intensity using type 2 X fiber, and this fiber release lactate. For low exercise intensity, 2X fiber doesn't need to recruit it, right? Or not really need recruited, but type 1 fiber still recruited, but type 1 fiber has lots of mitochondria, right? So at that time, you can use this, right? Lactate as energy. Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. And intensity is lower than the competition, so which may be a disadvantage if too much like long, slow distance training is used. Because doesn't make sense. So this is why if you go to the frequency is right, it's every week only 1 or 2 times. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Not every day. Not every day. Next one is pace tempo. Pace tempo. So here, intensity at a slightly above competition intensity corresponding to the lactate threshold, right? So how about class here, right? So lactate threshold, oh my goodness, is right now, even we don't know our brute max value is right, yeah, practically. But should I know lactate threshold value? How about class? Doesn't make sense, doesn't make sense. So Dr. Gon, there are any like other practical aspect if we don't know our lactate threshold value, how can we use? So this is from the textbook. So usually untrained people, 50 to 60% of their like brute max value, their lactate threshold occur. However, trained people, 70 to 80% of brute max value, they have their lactate threshold value. So actually, we can find is this lactate threshold value using the heart rate. But this class, we do not have enough time. So if you take my KINS 588 class next semester, and that class can cover like this kind of thing, right? Doesn't make sense. But today I can just talk about using percentage. So how about if we are trained? That case, usually 80% of brute max is your lactate threshold intensity initially, right? Doesn't make sense. How about today I exercise pace tempo first time? That case, you can use 80% of brute max value as your lactate threshold value. How about class? Doesn't make sense. I said initial. Doesn't make sense. How about class like this? Dr. Gon, still I don't know brute max. No, you already know because I already said using 1.5 mile run test. Doesn't make sense. 1.5 mile run test, you can get the brute max value. Is right. But this is case only running, is only running. But if you use is bike, this is a little different story. We need another test, like a power test, maximum power test. So this pace tempo test, so it means the lactate threshold, I can change 80% of brute max. I can change 80% of your 1.5 mile run maximum speed. How about class? Doesn't make sense? How practical? So LSD, 70% of brute max. Pace tempo, 80% of brute max. I already said is initial intensity. If you succeed, you can increase like 2% of 80%, 2% of 70%. Doesn't make sense. Or our textbook mentioned we need to increase first frequency and what is duration, so we can increase that first. So doesn't make sense. And steady pace tempo, right? 20 to 30 minutes of continuous training at the lactate threshold level, or 80% of brute max, 80% of 1.5 mile test. Intermediate pace tempo training, series of shorter interval with a brief recovery period. It's kind of like a HIIT program. Doesn't make sense. But using 80% of brute max. And objective, develop a sense of race pace and enhance the body's ability to sustain exercise at that pace. Is right there. It's a racing pace. Improve running economy and increase lactate threshold. Can you guess how this kind of exercise intensity increase running economy, increase lactate threshold? Running economy means this you remember one intensity, same intensity, but one person has low oxygen consumption. Doesn't make, did you remember? Or within person, because train, same exercise intensity, but right now this person needs less oxygen demand. How about class? Did you remember? And how I would like to say, in the muscle, there are mitochondria is right. But if you keep exercise, the mitochondria size and number increase. So same space, but you have more mitochondria. Doesn't make sense. This case, you have better economy. Doesn't make sense. And another one, maybe your body like biomechanically changed, biomechanically changed, right? Structurally changed. So your running performance better, right? Your form is better. Your form is better. Like that kind of approach. That doesn't make sense. And another one, did you remember I said running economy mean like a muscle fiber is, but same muscle fiber is more mitochondria, uh, bigger mitochondria. Doesn't make sense. You can have that kind of situation. Same when you lose your body mass. If you lose your body mass, even you do not really train, but your economy increase because your size is decreased, but same mitochondria number and same size of a mitochondria. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So aerobic training is always lighter weight is better. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Sometimes like endurance runner, marathoner looks very thin, is right? Very thin. This is why. And another one looks very thin means their body is a catabolic status. Catabolic status is right. So that case already body catabolic status, body ready to burn. I'm sorry, not burn. Ready to maximize our fat is right. Maximize metabolize our fat, metabolize our glycogen because the thinner body is catabolic status, is right. So this is why endurance runner looks very thin, very thin. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Some coach force even female athlete to lose weight, but that case female has different bodies, right? Because they need a period. But really lose weight a lot and dehydrate a lot. Finally, they do not have like a period. That case is hormone imbalances, right? That case, I don't know if this is a good idea or good idea to lose weight even without like period. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't. So anyway, this is why very thinner person like a Kenya runner looks very thin, is right? It seems like it's too thin, but it's totally okay because their body is prepared to catabolize fat, is right? Now we already mentioned about this one. Interval training, exercise and intensity close to VO2 max. Wow. For 3 to 5 minutes, work rest ratio should be 1:1. So our textbook definition of interval training is exercise intensity VO2 max value, 3 to 5 minute exercise, and another 3 to 5 minutes just rest. Just rest, maybe just walking. Like this is kind of interval training based on our textbook definition. Class, does it make sense? Again, oh my goodness, close to VO2 max. How can you know? Is right? Without metabolic curve. Even with the metabolic curve, it is not really easy to measure VO2 max. So it means why not just using maximum 1.5 mile run speed? Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense. Like this kind of approach. Class, do you think it's okay, right? If you already tried to measure your 1.5 mile run test, you know that is kind of like a challenge test. Yeah, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But if you have this kind of a number, 1.5 mile run your speed, you can apply many exercise type of aerobic exercise type is right, training is right. But if you don't know your 1.5 mile run speed, there are no way to have this kind of a different program. How about class? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So as a kinesiology major, you never really measure 1.5 mile run test, the value, as well as you do not know your VO2 max value. It means it's very poor, to tell the truth, because you didn't get any career, you didn't get any knowledge about this kind of thing. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't. I strongly recommend do 1.5 mile run test. How about class? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Just practically, how can test 1.5 mile run test, right? After warming up, how about like a 7.5 mile power, you run on the treadmill. And if you succeed, next day, try 7.7. If you succeed, point to increase 7.9. If you succeed, 8.1, like this. Just keep doing, keep doing. Usually, you do not need to take rest 3 days. You can take rest 1 or 2 days, but not more than 3 days. You will lose this capacity. So just keep exercise. Finally, how about you succeed 8.5? But if you fail 8.7 several times, it means 8.5 mile per hour is your maximum 1.5 mile run test speed. Doesn't make sense. You can use this speed, long, slow distance, pace tempo, and like this kind of interval training. How about class? Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. It sounds like okay, but if you really try it, you're surprised. It can give a lot of idea, a lot of career to you. Doesn't make sense. So this allows athlete to train at intensity close to VO2 max value. Is right, is right. Because if you just keep exercise VO2 max value, you cannot exercise longer than 8 to 12 minutes. Is right, 8 to 12 minutes. But this exercise 3 to 5 minutes, and 3 to 5 minutes take rest, and 3 to 5 minutes VO2 max, and 3 to 5 minutes take rest. Like this kind of approach doesn't make sense. Doesn't. This is interval training. Interval training. Yes. And next one is high intensity interval training. But you know, this textbook written in I think it's 2014. So this textbook is a little bit confused. Interval training and high intensity interval training. I believe next edition will be a little bit different because right now we study more, right? So here, HIIT, use repeated high intensity bout interspread with brief recovery period. Right? So I think it's very similar as interval intensity, right? But intensity a little bit different. So it's here. So several minutes above 90% of VO2 max. Yeah, 90% of VO2 max. And the duration is 2 to 3 minutes, that 90% of VO2 max, but less than 2 minutes is a relief bout. So did you remember interval is 1 versus 1 is right? But this case is look like that case exercise 3 and recovery 2. A little bit different is right? Doesn't make sense? Because recovery is only smaller part. So this is why VO2 max value is 90%, not 100%. Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. So very similar, but this is the 90% and interval training, VO2 max, right? But it seems like this is high intensity interval training. Interval training is just interval training, but interval training exercise intensity 100%. This is high intensity interval training is 90%. It's some kind of a controversial issue, right? Controversial. So this is why I said it should be a little bit changed. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Next one is fartlek training. Oh my goodness. Even this is combined other training method. Doesn't make sense. It combined. So easy running combined with hill or short or fast first 85-90% VO2 max. So it's combined, right? And can be adaptive cycling and swimming. I think it sounds like good. I think it's Tazi. I'm not really sure, but maybe he's a cyclist. So they use fartlek training. And benefits are like to include enhanced VO2 max, increased lactate threshold, and improve running economic fuel utilization. So it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But how about without no VO2 max value? How can we use it, right? So this is why I believe Dr. Gon is a very practical person to explain well using 1.5 mile run test. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense because you do not need to measure heart rate, just speed, just speed. How about class? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Or some equation can use the body mass too, right? So it means using 1.5 mile run test. Its original equation is you need to know your body mass as well as your performance. Doesn't make sense. But Dr. Gon studied, and I have some equation. You do not need any like heart rate and body mass. Just performance itself. Just performance itself. And I posted my published article about HIIT program in our Canvas Moodles, Canvas site, our model, this week model. So please read, please read. And any question, let me know. Yeah. So and another one, I'm not really sure we have enough time to talk about purification, but hopefully, right. So this is purification, right? How about this kind of program? It look like weekly basis, right? But how about like a season based? So because this is the strength and conditioning for athletes, right? So how can you apply? So here, off season, pre-season, in season, post season, right? So doesn't make sense, but you should know, right? Off season sounds like off season is off. I think I should go to like a theater. I should take a rest, is it right? But actually, off season is base training. This is important season. How about doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. Off season is important. Is important. But how about class based on your experience, like a club team at high school? Do you think there are off season training? Off season really just off, is right? It's not like how about this is off season? We need this kind of training. No, is right? No, right? How about track and field, like swimming, right? High school, they just cover preseason, right? And season, not off season, is right? But preseason is kind of a transition, and season is really season. There are no way like to train. Doesn't make sense. So many times club sports, like they do not have any off season, but this is important season. How about class doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. It's many times they just go to the school and several weeks later they just compete, is right? So off season school usually do not really take care. Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. I don't know you agree or not, but my understanding, my observation is our American and high school system, there are no off season. Right? Off season means no, no, right? Yeah, doesn't make sense. Oh, I think Motoki is agree. Motoki agree, right? So you know, I'm kinesiology professor. I have all equipment. So I have a swimmer. My son, they are swimmer. My another son is track and field and cross country runner. Right? They do not have any off season. So I train them during off season. I train them. Doesn't make sense. So they have a transition and in season they compete. So usually they are much better prepared than other high school students because I train their off season. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And another one, how about like we have oh Luis is here. How about just in case Luis want to business train for high school student? Right? That case at the gym he said off season training like this. He advertised off season training. Many people surprised. We need training during off season, but yes, this is important period. We need off season. Doesn't make sense because many times people confuse post season and off season because of the terminology. Doesn't make sense. But off season is important. You learn everything from me. Is most of them for off season to tell the truth. Dr. Won, how about during season? That is coach's job, not trainer's job. Doesn't make sense. It's really separating. So Dr. Wan is like really expert. I never talk to the like a coach, right? Because this is their job. But off season, this is my job. I really train them. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. I think it's a really good idea. Right? So off season, being with long duration and low intensity, gradually increase exercise intensity and to a less extent duration is right. There are something occur. This is pure duration, right? It's important time. And preseason, focus increase intensity, maintain or reduce duration, and incorporate a type of training. So it's kind of preseason, it's kind of like a transition, right? And in season, programs design around complete low intensity, short duration training just before race day. So this case usually is coach's job, is right? Coach's job. Coach can do that. And post season, focus on recovering from complete season to maintain sufficient fitness. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't. So this is kind of a season, right? And another one, how about post season? Post season, please watch here. A mode of training can be used to maintain general conditioning athlete during period of reduced training due to injury or during recovery from training cycle. So how about that? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. That is cross training. That is cross training. So how about if you're a runner? If you're a runner, but during cross training, you can do swim or you can do like a cycling. How about if you are swimmer, but cross training, stop swimming, and you can run? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. This is really good idea. I think Taji is a cyclist, so cross training period, he had a better stop cycle. He need another one, elliptical or like, but it's right? Cycling is kind of a high intense, top sports. So not elliptical. I think it's running or swimming is better for you. Oh. And detraining. It's right now there are two terminology. One is detraining, another one is tapering. So detraining is kind of like stop exercise. So you will lose your trained aspect, is right? But tapering means is a stop exercise to increase exercise intensity, to reach peak. So this is different, right? Detraining is stop exercise, quit exercise, but tapering is intentionally stop to increase peak. Right? How about that? Doesn't make sense. So detraining. Detraining occur when the athlete reduce training duration or intensity or sport training altogether due to a break in the training program, injury or illness is right. In the absence of approach training stimulus, the athlete experience loss of physical adaptation brought about by training. This is detraining. But I'll explain tapering soon. Tapering is intentionally quit and decrease duration and decrease in intensity intentionally, right? To reach peak. How about class doesn't make sense? And another one, this is detraining, right? And I'm not really sure you remember which kind of like training has detraining effect. So for example, power, strength, cardiorespiratory fitness. Three of them. Can you guess which one has more highest detraining effect? So it means if you stop exercise, you will lose easily. Oh my God, that's the answer, right? So to tell the truth, strength and power you can exercise every week. Every week. Even you can exercise every 2 weeks. Sometimes you can exercise every 4 weeks based on research. So, oh my goodness, Dr. One, can I exercise? Is it like a strength per month? It is possible. How about if we exercise only per week, strength, sometimes it increase. It's increased. Doesn't make sense. So it means, wow, we do not need to exercise that much because it has less detraining effect. Power and what is this? Our strength. But how about cardio? I already mentioned about cardio. Cardio, did you remember I said today 1.5 mile run test? You can test every day, or you can test alternative day, but you cannot really test even 2-day rest. How about Monday, Thursday? Is a little bit, there are already detraining effect. So did you remember I said 7.5? If we succeed, 7.7. If we succeed, 7.9. If we succeed, 8.1. It should be every day or alternative day. If you take more than 2 or 3 days, detraining occur. So 7.3 for 3 days rest. Even 7.3 is not easy. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. That much. So cardiorespiratory fitness has a detraining effect. So it should be careful. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So one of my students, his name is, I think it's Jose Soto, right? So he starts 7.8 mile power, and every day he tests 8.0, 8.2, 8.4, 8.6 is like this, is like this. Finally, he did 10.2. So 7.8, and he kept test, and he reached 10.2. Even he's surprised, and every classmate surprised. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Right now, I think he is a physical therapist. I think he already became, right? I believe he already know. Dr. Gon, I have experience. Thank you very much. But I think I couldn't do that one again because he should do every day, even 2 or 3 days take rest, he lose. So it's very tough to reach 10.2, right? See, there are detraining effect. However, if you have 1RM, like 235 pounds, you take rest 6 months, is right now only 210. That case, even just several weeks, you can reach 235 easily. Israel doesn't make sense because it has less detraining. That is detraining. Tapering is systematic reduction. Is it right? Is intentionally reduce exercise intensity or duration to reach peak. So this is different points, right? Different training studies. Right? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And how about we just talk about aerobic exercise, but resistance training is important too. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense because every event, even marathon, has what is it? Like this one. It can improve hill climbing and bridging gap between competitor during breakers weight and the final sprint. See, every endurance running has final sprint, is right? So this resist training can help. Doesn't make sense? Doesn't make sense. I think, do you agree? Do you agree? So resist training is always important. So benefit may include improvement in short-term exercise performance like sprint and faster recovery from injury. I think makes sense. It increases exercise tolerance, prevention of overuse injury, and reduction of muscle imbalance. Oh, what does it mean? See, is our knee joint, the quadricep and hamstring. Can you guess our balance? Quadricep and hamstring is 1:1, but actually no. Quadricep should be 100% and hamstring should be 70%. This is our balance. Upper class doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Knee balance to maintain quadricep should be 70%, but hamstring should be 10%. But however, if we have a hamstring is really strong, that case 100% quadricep, 80% hamstring sounds good, is right? But ratio should be 100 to 70. That case, hamstring should be do not really exercise, but quadricep should be stronger. Doesn't make sense. How can do? Using resist training. Upper class doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Like this kind of approach. So this is why resist training is important. Oh, last one is altitude, but I believe Taji already have experience. He compete as high altitude, is right? But he live in sea area, right? Right, sea surface area, right? But he go to the high altitude, he compete. I'm not really sure his feeling, but he doesn't have enough time to adapt it. Maybe he was tough time. Doesn't make sense. Tough time, because air is thinner. To get oxygen in our body, he need to use more neck muscle. Is right. Is right. Is right. So it means is neck muscle release proton because it has a kind of like high exercise intensity. This proton go to his brain is very quickly. Is very quickly, or just feel like that top right. Top is right. So this case. So this case, right? He has like high amount of sickness. Is right. So to prevent this one is here. Where it is acclimatization may occur between 12 and 14 days at moderate altitude up to 2,300 meters, but can take up to several months. So he had better exercise 12 to 14 days is around 2,500 meters, is right. But sometimes some people need more several months is right to get this adaptation. But my opinion is because that kind of altitude, we cannot really train ourselves enough, is right? Cannot train. We can be adaptive, but cannot train, right? So this case is kind of a controversial. But this is from our textbook. I just covered.